Welcome to Sakai 2011 here at the Australian National University. My name is Osama Al-Qadi. I will be your host for this session titled Mobile Sakai, which is basically a mobile demo application on Sakai CLE presented by Steve Swinsberg. A little bit of background on Steve. He's a software developer at the Australian National University. He holds a master's degree in information technology, majoring in web and internet technologies, and a Bachelor of Science degree both from the University of New England. He also has several years of tertiary teaching experience. Steve is an active member of Sakai 2 Technical Coordination Committee, the maintenance team, the kernel team, and the security team. He also managed the Sakai 2.5 maintenance branch from 2008 up until 2010. He's also a member of JSAG Incubation Committee and is a committer on uPortal. In addition, Steve was selected as a Sakai Fellow. Steve also developed Profile 2, the social networking tool for Sakai 2, as well as the shortened URL service and the Sakai Wicket Maven archetype, which is basically a remote administration utility which has enhanced the Sakai app builder for new developers and starters. He also committed over 2 dozens of new web services to Sakai and also actively contributes to the various mailing lists and assists other developers within the community. Lastly, Steve has also written over dozens of articles on Sakai best practice and on how to regulate blogs about Sakai related developments. In 2008, he's written a paper on Sakai in distance education published in the Australian Society for Computers and Learning in Tertiary Education. So now I'm pleased to introduce Steve to you all. Yeah.
Thank you, Osama. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about mobile Sakai. This is essentially a Google Summer of Code application. I'll talk a bit more about Google Summer of Code in a moment, but the way it works was a student nominated to be part of the project with the Sakai Foundation, and I nominated to be a mentor for that particular project. So we're going to be talking about a bit about the project. We're going to be talking a lot about the technologies used, we'll do some demos, and also have a look at a sneak peek at the application towards the end. So Google Summer of Code, it's been around since 2005 and it's sponsored 4,500 students. Basically the way it works, software projects nominate themselves, so the Sakai Foundation said we will accept students. The projects and the mentors are proposed by the projects, and then students apply to that project to take on one of those software development projects. Only the best applications are selected. This year we had 41 applications for Sakai, but only 4 made it through. We had to filter through them all. The students actually get paid. They receive $5,000 US. They work with the mentor and the community of the project, gathering requirements, developing a project plan, getting feedback, seeing what the community actually wants out of this application, and then they go ahead and do it. They've got about 3 months to work. And then towards the end, it's just like an exam, pencils down, and they submit whatever they've done. They do a staged reviews about halfway through. That's when they receive their first amount of money. So the students have to sort of convince their mentors that they're actually been working on this project, because a lot of them are overseas. They're not here working with their mentors. The guy that I was mentoring was actually in Sri Lanka, and so we just communicated via email. And the basic premise of the Google Summer of Code is that it's to help the projects that They nominate themselves and they get real-world experience, the students get real-world experience, and the ultimate goal is that more source code is created and released for the benefit of all. So the goal of this application was to create a cross-platform application for the Sakai CLE. So there's a lot of talk about Sakai CLE, Sakai OAE, Sakai 2, Sakai 3. Sakai 2 is the Sakai CLE, if you haven't been following the recent name changes. Sakai 3 is now Sakai OAE, Open Academic Environment, and CLE stands for Collaborative Learning Environment. Here at ANU we use Sakai 2, Sakai CLE, and we call it Alliance. So we're developing an application for Sakai CLE. We wanted to build in support for the most used tool set. So by this I mean announcements, assignments, resources, the wiki, profiles, site members like the roster, gradebook, things like that, things that most people use. Some of these might actually only be read-only, so it's probably very difficult to edit a wiki page on a mobile device. So that would probably just be a read-only view. We haven't actually built support for the wiki yet, but that's on the list. And one of the other goals was to have a specially designed user interface. So we don't just want to regurgitate the normal portal user interface because it's massive, it takes a lot of time to download, and it uses iframes as well. We want a simple, as with any mobile app, you want a simple, cut down, stripped down interface that's really easy to use. Only a couple of things to click on. The other thing is that mobile devices are actually slow. So your CPU is quite slow, whether or not you've actually got an internet connection, so 3G, where I live don't have 3G, we have that stupid circle thing which means nothing works. So having something that needs to download a lot of data, that's never going to work and it's just going to frustrate people. So we wanted to just pull down the data that the application needs. So I did some metrics. Profile 2, which is a tool that I wrote and presenting on later this afternoon, rendered in the portal, no caching, 207 kilobytes to download my page. Now that includes my profile image, the text of my profile, and the thumbnails of the people that I'm connected to. So it's like a little social networking app. So 207 kilobytes. Now, I'm going to be talking a little bit about a RESTful web service framework that we're using for this, which is built into the Sakai CLE. And extracting the data that way, 1.7 kilobytes. Okay, so that's with no images. If you want to add the images on, so adding the thumbnail images on, add another 10 kilobytes. That's nothing. Compared to 207 kilobytes, which is quite a lot. Browser caching will improve that even further. So all those images are set up with a well-known URL, so the browser will cache them. So some of the technologies used, jQuery mobile framework, Sakai entity broker, and PhoneGap. So jQuery is built on, jQuery mobile is built on jQuery. If you've heard of that before, it's a JavaScript framework. Entity broker is like I mentioned, a web service, RESTful web service framework that ships with Sakai CLE. And then tying all that together is PhoneGap, which is a cross-platform JavaScript library which allows you to create mobile applications that you can then stick on the App Store, Android Marketplace, and sell them if you want. It's an approved framework for putting applications up on the App Stores. So firstly, talking about jQuery Mobile, their mantra is write less, do more. I've been using jQuery for quite a while, and that is true. So previously, to do something like an AJAX request, AJAX, if you're not familiar with, just means an asynchronous request to receive generally XML, but now it's more something like JSON, which is a JavaScript piece of code. But previously to do that, you would have quite a few number of lines. You'd have to test whether or not the browser supports it, make different checks for different types of browsers. And then as new browsers come out, the code might break. jQuery takes all that, sticks into one line. So you can make a request, one line. It'll automatically call success and error functions for you, so you don't need to worry about handling all this extra stuff, all this boilerplate code. You can just get in there and actually write real code. jQuery Mobile extends that by providing layouts, in terms of CSS and templates, HTML templates that you can use. Little widgets, so things like buttons and form items and you know, like the nav bar. So if you're on an iPhone, you've got the little back and forward buttons and the settings and the tabs down the bottom and stuff like that. And most of all, it's touch optimized. So so the buttons are designed to be the correct size according to the Apple Human Interface Guidelines. So they need to be a certain size for you to actually be able to click them. And it's also got transitions for things like swiping and for things flipping in and out, just like a normal mobile application, a native mobile application would do. And one of the other things that jQuery Mobile does is because it works on so many different mobile devices, as you can see at the bottom here, iOS, Android, BlackBerry, Symbian, Palm, Windows Phone. I've never heard of Bada or Migo, but it supports those as well. It actually presents a unified user interface across all of those. So if you have two devices, iOS, iPhone, and an Android, and look at an app, say maybe the Foursquare app or something, they look different. The buttons look different, the way things happen is different. Writing an application in jQuery Mobile means that they look exactly the same. It's the same code being used for both applications. So, awesome, my transition didn't work. You need to imagine, on the left, there was a sticky that said, listed all the different types of applications that you need to write, iOS, Android, Windows Phone, BlackBerry. And on the second was a very witty sticky that said, let's write a jQuery mobile app and then go to the pub. So I would rather be on this side. So jQuery Mobile has a vibrant community and lots of sponsors, lots of people who actually injected a lot of cash into this project, plus also people that are using it themselves. So people like Mozilla, Nokia, Adobe, BlackBerry, Palm, a lot of different big corporations that are actually backing this project. And that was one of the biggest, well, sorry, not biggest, that was one of the major decision points. Community support. Whenever you're choosing something that's open source, you really need to have a community support behind it. You don't want someone to create something, you go and adopt it, invest a lot of time and money into it, and then it drops off the radar, doesn't get supported, doesn't get upgraded, things come out, you can't upgrade, you're stuck. So community support is a really important factor that needs to be decided on. So I've got a little demo here. This is a screenshot of the jQuery mobile demo page. As you can see already, it kind of looks like an app. If you've got an iPad, you probably recognise some of that stuff. Okay. Now, it's actually formatted again. You notice that screenshot I took was on my full desktop computer. Now I'm on a smaller screen because it's going through the projector. And it's detected that I'm actually on a small device, so it's rendered stuff differently already, and I didn't have to do anything. So we'll make this, there you go, bigger or smaller, magic. Okay, so stuff like, there you go, you saw a slide, so you can imagine that being a swipe transition through different pages of the app. This is a bit of a boring one, so we probably want to go back to something like toolbars. Okay, so this is a demo application, but it's also their API reference. So whilst you're seeing stuff working, you can actually read the documentation and see how it works. So it's telling you stuff about the different types of code that you can put in. Let's go to form elements. Okay, so we've got a nicely formatted, rather than just a plain old boring text input box, we've got a nicely formatted text input, things like the search buttons that would be familiar to someone that uses Safari or uses like an iOS device. This is a very large flip switch. Sliders, this is like the holy grail. I don't know why HTML doesn't come with a slider. Cool little checkboxes, stuff that just makes it easy. So you can see that those checkboxes, they're actually quite large. So you can imagine your finger trying to tap on that. I've been on so many web pages on my phone or iPad or something that not sort of mobile optimized. You've got to zoom in, or you've got a tiny little box you need to click in. So this is just stuff that makes it bigger natively, so that you can just click on stuff. So again, bold, things like this. These are like little buttons. And then there's all information on there about how you can set up all the different transitions, so you can have flips. Let's see if I can find that. It's not in advance, so I don't worry. So JavaScript by itself has a bunch of support for, on mouse over or on click, stuff like that. This extends that, so you've got stuff like tap or tap and hold. A lot of touch events. It's trying to mimic all the native stuff. So I'll flip back to the presentation. So if you just do a search for jQuery Mobile, you'll see you'll see the demo. You can get to. So we looked at a couple of alternatives as well. JQ Touch, it's nice. I actually did a little app in that at first, so did Osama actually, as we were mucking around with it. Doesn't have as many widgets, doesn't seem to have progressed since we last looked at it, which was about 6 months ago. I think it's actually a project of Senture Touch. Senture are a corporation who are creating these some of these mobile frameworks. And I think it's kind of been consumed inside Senture Touch, although you can still use it. So I'm not actually sure what the status of it is. So that's obviously a problem if you can't see any updates. Like I said, community support. Senture Touch, it's another framework. I looked at it a while ago. Didn't seem as promising or as what's the word, performance, quick. It has actually improved in leaps and bounds. I was looking at this the other day and it is actually awesome. I would probably recommend it now. It looks really slick. It has a comprehensive set of buttons and all that sort of stuff. It's got this really cool toolbar which does actually sit down the bottom, and so you can create like little tabs and stuff like that. It actually is quite nice. One issue is that the license might be an issue. It comes under GPL. They've also got a commercial license. Now, I am not a lawyer, well, I am starting to be one, but GPL may be a problem for commercial organisations because you might need to release it open source. Therefore, you might need to purchase the commercial license, which might cost big bucks. So something that you would need to look into if you're considering a Senture Touch. Entity Broker. So this is the RESTful Web Service API in Sakai. It's been around since 2.4. I know that CSU are using Entity Broker, and they're on 2.4. So it works in 2.4. It supports it's based on the premise of standard HTTP verbs, which are things like get, post, put, delete, stuff like that. It takes any piece of data that you've got inside Sakai and will serialize it out to JSON or XML. Can also return binaries, so things like images. There's an entity provider for the profile image, and that returns an image. And also plain text, so if you've just got a string you want to spit out, you can do that. It's a full API, so not just gets. You can actually post data to it. You can post an XML structure to it, and then it will persist that into the database. You can update entities, you can delete entities by using those requests. So a post, a put, a delete. You can actually affect data inside Sakai. The other thing is that because it conforms to the REST microformat spec, is that the data is exposed via well-known URLs. So to read something, to get a piece of data, you would make a GET request to some prefix, so let's say profile/ID. So /profile/Steve will give you my profile. If you want to create a profile, do a post. So /profile/new, and you would send that profile data in an XML structure or a JSON structure, and then it would create you a profile. Likewise for updates and deletes, puts or deletes. It also conforms to the standard HTTP status responses. So you've all seen a 404 when you type in a random URL that doesn't exist. That's a standard HTTP response, not found. There's also ones like 200, which you probably never see because the browser interprets that as thumbs up. Or there's a 401, which means unauthorized. So you'll see a 401 a lot when you're using Entity Broker, and that means you need to log in. So using something like jQuery, which handles these error codes as well, you can make a request, and it might throw an error, a 401 error. So then you can say, oh, well, this person needs to log in, so I'll take them to the login form. Or it might throw a 404, and you might print a message saying, you know, bad request, or something was broken. And Entity Broker is actually supported in many of the Sakai tools and services. It's quite easy to retrofit as well onto the existing services. So because some of these tools were written way back in the Sakai 2.1, 2.2 era, and Entity Broker didn't come around until sort of 2.5, and then it was backfitted to 2.4. There's a few tools that are lacking, but it's quite easy to stick it in there. So in terms of retrofitting Entity Broker, if the tool or service has a well-designed API, if there's good separation of your DAO, which is your data access object, which means things like database, and your business logic, assuming logic isn't handled in the user interface, which is bad, and the permission checks are handled in the API. So essentially it's saying that if everything is sweet, if the API is really nice, then adding support is as simple as calling that API. You don't need to worry about permission checks. You don't need to worry about going to the database because the API does it all for you. So this is an example of getting a user profile in Entity Broker using the API. And I wrote it, so it's awesome. But profile logic, get user profile. Pretty simple, one line of code. We've now got a user profile as XML or JSON. So if you have a Sakai instance, instead of putting /portal on the end, delete that and put /direct, and you will get a page which tells you all about Entity Broker. It'll tell you everything that your instance of Sakai can do, things like getting profiles, getting assignments, getting announcements, stuff like that. And like I said, it's as simple as making a request. So if I want to get my profile, I go to /direct/profile/Steve, and then I want it in JSON format, so I say .json, and I get my profile in JSON format. Likewise for getting the current user, and then for getting announcements. So you can still stick things into the query string, things like the number of announcements you want. This particular one, the N means the number of announcements, and the D means how many days to go back in time. So if you want to get historical announcements, you can get up to 30 days worth of them, or as many as you want. So a little bit of a demo of Entity Broker. So this is my So this is my Sakai instance. I'm actually logged in. All I'm going to do is log out. And I have a page here, which I'll just quickly show you. A little bit of JavaScript. This is the bit we're doing here. So this is actually just jQuery, but jQuery Mobile supports all this stuff as well. So we're making an AJAX request to this URL. Localhost means my computer. And what I'm going to do is establish a session. I'm making a post request. And I want to send username and password as admin. So that's what the default username and password is. And if we have success, which generally equates to a 200, so that's like a wrapper over that 200 response, then we're going to do something. If we have an error, which might mean, not found or unauthorized or something, then we're going to print a message. Okay. So what I did then was load that page, call that method, log in with admin, and it returned my session. Now that session is just a GUID, globally universal unique thingy. But essentially in Sakai, that's how your sessions are tracked. So if I now go back to my page, I'm logged in, okay, because that's put a cookie into my browser, using the same browser, and I'm logged in. So what we can do is get rid of this one. So if I had a page that had a few buttons on it that could call different functions, I could make this a bit easier. But what we're doing now is we're making a GET request this time to that URL I told you before, get direct profile admin. So because I'm logged in as the admin user, I want to get the admin profile. And similar sort of thing, I'm just going to get it back as JSON. So I'm saying here it's going to come back as JSON, and we're returning it in JSON format. Okay. So this person doesn't actually have a profile, but you can see all the profile fields. So academic profile URL, birthday, things like date of birth, favourite books, nickname, position, stuff like that. If we actually had filled that profile out, then we would get real data. And one more. So this is now returning binary data directly. Just comment this one out. Okay, so we're using the entity URL directly into an image tag. It's going to return an image. This particular entity always returns an image, whether or not you've got one or not. You'll get a default. So let's quickly flip over. Call that an image. Hooray! So entity broker can return all sorts of data, and it can do all sorts of cool things. Now, quickly on PhoneGap. How are we going for time? 5 minutes. Okay. Probably going to go a little bit over time, sorry. So PhoneGap, HTML5, CSS3 and JavaScript. That's all you need to create an actual application. You can author your app with those technologies, and if you inject in, PhoneGap is just a JavaScript library. If you inject that in, you can get access to all of the native device APIs. Accelerometer, camera, compass, contacts, file system, geolocation, media, notification, lots more stuff. There's a matrix of compatibility on their website. But basically, this is an accepted framework for publishing to the app stores. So we use this framework so that we could publish to the app store. It's basically, it adds a bit of spice to your application by giving you access to those native APIs. It's not a whole framework for you to develop in. You still use something like maybe jQuery or Accenture Touch or something, but you can still write in stuff you're comfortable with. You don't have to learn a whole new framework. I'm just going to skip over the PhoneGap stuff. Actually no, so that's how easy it is to get stuff like the accelerometer. Navigator.accelerometer.getCurrentAcceleration, and that will return a value. You know, if you're throwing your phone on the floor, it'll return a value for the accelerometer. PhoneGap comes with a build cloud, so you can write your code once. You don't have to have 5 different computers. You don't even have to have a Mac if you're developing a Mac application. You can write your code, upload it to the build cloud, and it will create an Android, Windows, I think Palm, and an iOS app for you, and you can download it and do whatever you want with it. We did look at an alternative, one called, it's not called Titanium Mobile, it's called Accelerated Titanium. It was actually a different syntax, so given the time constraints of this app, we didn't actually want to learn a new framework. And it replaces the entire stack, so you write your application in this framework. But what it does is it compiles it into native code. So it'll compile it into native Cocoa Touch for iOS or Java for Android. The performance actually probably could be better than a HTML5 app. You would need to test that out. Finally, the app. I know you've all been waiting for this. I've got some screenshots here. I could show you the application later on if you come and see me, but because it's complex to build and stuff. The login screen, so obviously it detects whether or not you're logged in. and then it will take you to your list of sites. So there's a entity broker feed for your list of sites. You can then choose one, click on it, and then you drill into the site on the left there, and you can see the supported tools that we've got at the moment, announcements and assignments. The other supported tools, obviously you can't click on because they don't do anything. And then if you click on announcements, you come in here and you can actually see your announcements. So the other thing that we're adding here is this little indicator, so you can see if there's new announcements, new assignments. All sorts of stuff can be done using these entity broker feeds. Because you can just make an AGX request, you can get all sorts of cool information. And then also, if you noticed up the top there, there's those tabs, site, profile, connections, and there's also a few tabs down the bottom. If you click on profile, so that's not actually a tool, it's more like a bit of the app. You can go into your profile. Now, a lot of this information, a lot of this user interface could be adjusted, cleaned up, but one of the things we're looking at doing is making this so that individual institutions can skin it for their own requirements. So you can go in and see the profile. If you've used Sakai, the profile would be, you would have seen the profile in your My Workspace site. And then the other thing that the profile gives is connections, so people that you're connected to, your friends, like Facebook kind of thing. I'm actually talking about profile later on this afternoon, so if you want to come along to that. So currently supported tools, announcements, profile, working on assignments. Some of the issues that we came across, same origin policy. Does anyone know what that is? Okay, so that's a thing built into a browser which says if you're on a web page, you can't access data from another site. And that's good because someone can't write a web page which in the background goes off and sends your cookie to another web page or goes off and does something malicious. So you can, if you've ever programmed in JavaScript before, you'll know that you can include a whole stack of JavaScript libraries, and you can access the methods in all of those. It's open slather when you're on the same host and the same port. You can't do that across the net. You can't access a JavaScript file or a JavaScript method, from another server. One of the workarounds is a thing called padded JSON, and what that does is instead of returning something like, so everyone's seen XML. If you think of just think of XML. If you don't know what JSON is, just think of XML. And there's like a little wrapper around this JSON which allows that to be downloaded and run. That actually has security issues in itself. So in our investigations in this, we were going to use JSON-P, decided against it. And the reason for deciding against it is that that restriction is only on the HTTP protocol. It's not on the file protocol. So if you open a HTML file from your computer in your browser, it'll say file. That's not restricted. And PhoneGap is served via a file. So we're sweet. We don't have to worry about this JSON or this cross-origin policy thing. If you want to know more about JSON-P and the security issues, come and talk to me, because I did quite a bit of research into it, and there is a massive security issue with it. So don't use it. Some other questions you need to ask yourself: are native apps better than HTML5 apps? Who says yes? Could be. I'm still on the fence, to be honest. You've got to think about things like capabilities, speed, the user interface, whether or not you're concerned about writing 10 different apps or just one. If you really want to capture your market, you probably want to write 10 different apps. That's going to cost a lot of money, take a lot of time because they're all different. Really needs some real world testing about what your requirements are. So the other issue that we've actually debated here at ANU is, what about a mobile-enabled web page? Why can't we just have a web page which, when you go to it displays nicely, you've got big things you can touch and do stuff like that. You can actually use jQuery Mobile on a normal web page if you want. You just turn it into a mobile-looking web page. But then you've got to ask yourself, are you actually interested in using any of the features of the mobile device? HTML5 gives you geolocation, and it gives you local storage, which means you can store stuff, kind of like a cookie, but you can store more things. You can also use local databases now, so with the newer browsers, they come with a database you can access with JavaScript. but that's about it. If you want to do any sort of, compass or plot from here to there, or detect when people have, moved their device, or shake to reload, or you want to allow people to do mashups so they can take a picture and upload somewhere. If you want to do any of that sort of stuff, you can't really do that with a mobile web page because you don't have access to any of those device features. You've got to also remember that a cross-domain restriction will apply to you. So if you want to access data from a remote server, you won't be able to. The other issue is browser support. I've been working in this field for a long time, and browser support, when they release new browsers, it's a real pain. It's a nightmare to try and get everything working everything working correctly, sorry. Or you use something like jQuery Mobile, which can take a lot of that hassle out for you. Because it's tested on all these new browsers, you use the same piece of code and it works on all the browsers. That's what it's designed to do. The other thing is maybe you could just write an app for a few devices. In education, that's probably not really a goer because there's equity issues there. If you write an iOS app, what about all the people who have Androids? Are you forcing people to use iOS? There's probably a case there. So like I said, education, you probably want a native app. You've got things like offline use. You can do your work and you can sync it up later on when you find a connection. There's a thing called Google Gears, which was a HTML5 technology, which has actually been discontinued. And there's a lot of synchronization work for HTML5 to be able to do this stuff like, you're offline, so that's okay, we'll just store it here, and then when you find a connection, we'll upload it. That's a stack of work. A native app can give you all of the access to like local files and things like that, which can be synchronized later on. The other issue is security of your JavaScript. So because JavaScript is all run client-side, the user can see everything. There's a thing called OAuth, which is designed to protect username and passwords by turning them into like a little token and a secret, which are massive. But your application also needs to have a token and a secret, and because it's clear text, you'll be able to see it. So a person could take them and say, I'm actually twitter.app and sending stuff to Twitter, because they could steal that, if Twitter actually did it in JavaScript, which I don't. An actual application, a HTML5 app in PhoneGap can obscure this somewhat because you can stick this stuff in like the settings of the app, which the user can't see, but a user could just deconstruct your app. That's about it. I know I've probably run over time, so if there are any questions, happy to take them now, or I'll be around. Yep, hi.
David Bartlett, Northern City Institute of TAFE.
G'day.
I just, with PhoneGap,
Yep.
is it an app, or is it a web service that it creates?
Yeah, so I didn't explain it, so I was kind of skimmed over PhoneGap. So it is if you want to write an iOS app, you grab their iOS like startup project, stick your code into that, and then it can bundle it up as an application. You can then stick that same code into an Android app or a Windows app, exactly the same, you don't have to change anything. It's kind of like a build wrapper.
So you end up with an app?
Yeah, you end up with an actual app.
You only have to do the code.
That's right, yeah. And because you're doing it in HTML5, JavaScript, CSS, it's going to be the same across everything.
So could you see the situation where PhoneGap could actually just generate a web-based service that would work across platform, given them?
So PhoneGap needs to be run on a mobile device. If you want to just create a web service, I would just use something like jQuery Mobile. But then you're going to have those issues with that cross-domain thing, which PhoneGap doesn't have. Yeah. Yep. Sam?
You're looking at the assignments stuff.
Yep.
Have you found any issues actually are you just listing the information, or can you actually submit using your mobile device?
No, it'll be just listing. There's a bit of work that needs to be done on the entity provider for assignments because at the moment it's not really. You can get an assignment if you know the assignment ID, but you can't get a listing of the assignment. So there's a bit of work that needs to be done there to get the full list, and then you can drill into it a bit further.
But do you envisage being able to submit?
Probably not, because generally people would like upload a file,
Yeah.
which they wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, I know that's a downside.
Yeah.
Of the mobile. Even, I mean, like you could see maybe an iPad where they write, you know.
Or type in the field.
Yeah, well, you know, it might be something small that they want to.
Yeah, it could do. So I mean, at the moment we're just targeting like a phone, but you could do a different app for the
But giving
iPad.
access to the directory would be the issue.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, PhoneGap allows you to access files on the system, but you got to have a file on the system, and you can't really upload a file to your phone. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No worries. Yep.
Have you tried it on any other platforms other than iPhone?
Yep. So the guy who was doing it, Kaysun, his name is, he was actually working on an Android phone, and then I've built it onto my, or I haven't built it onto my phone, but I've built it into an iOS app as well. So both Android and iOS, yeah, same, works the same.
Steve, was the jQuery mobile, was that used at all in the Sakai mobile?
Yeah, so that was rendering the entire interface
Okay.
and making all of the AJAX requests. That was all using jQuery mobile.
So a combination of PhoneGap and that?
Yeah, so PhoneGap gave us access, well, we're only really using PhoneGap here as a build wrapper, not accessing any of the device features just yet. So PhoneGap allows us to build the app into an app. jQuery Mobile gives us all of the Ajaxy stuff and the buttons and the user interface designed for a mobile.
Is that some of Code's projects over now, isn't it?
Yep, ended 2 weeks ago. He's still actually working on the app, which is really cool because I was kind of indoctrinating him into Sakai, and now he's addicted.
Now he's one of us.
That's right. Did it.
So how many of those file requests did you need to do to overcome that issue using PhoneGap? Could you deploy the Essential Touch app online, or are there too many kind of workarounds?
So, could you turn this into a web page? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, like you've built it in jQuery.
Yeah.
So can you just take that jQuery app and put that online?
No, because of that cross-domain
So how many
restriction.
of those issues though would you need to work around?
All of them, because of every piece of data that's in this. So this form on the left, that sends a request.
Yep.
It sends a post request to log in. This one makes a GET request to get your sites. You wouldn't be able to do any of that. So you wouldn't get past the first
You
screen.
can
of that.
host it from within Sakai itself?
It would have to be hosted on the domain, on your domain. If you want to do that, then that's fine. And it has to be on the same port as well. So same domain, same port, that would be fine. But if it was on a different website, so one thing we were looking at doing is like a campus map using AJAX requests. If we want to do that on a different server to where the data is, we wouldn't be able to do that.
Steve, one more quick one. What's the way forward with the mobile app for Sakai? Is there a plan of how that will be further developed?
So I'd like to see this fleshed out a little bit more and a bit of the interface sort of cleaned up a little bit. It looks really nice, but I just want to, go over it, get some people going over it, and get some feedback. And then, stuff like this button here is probably a little bit too big. Things like that. And then just see, no one's done a native app. Well, that's not true. There was a Google Summer of Code project to do a native app for OAE, Sakai OAE, and last year there was an Android app for Sakai CLE, but I don't think it's got as much support behind it as something like this has. We model all of this stuff on the IU, Indiana University mobile application, which have now, I think, switched over to PhoneGap. It was a native app, and now they switched over to this, just because they can deploy to multiple platforms really easily. So I think getting this app fleshed out a bit more, and then presenting it to the community and saying, hey, what do you think? The beauty about this is you can download the source code now, customize the style, the CSS, and go and sell it if you want. or stick it on, you know, we could brand this as like an ANU app or CSU app or something, and then you could start developing more, whatever. It's just like a normal project, and then stick it on the App Store as the CSU app or the ANU app. Customize it to your own needs. We better stop. Yep. So we better stop. Thanks a lot for coming, everyone.
Actually, you need from me.